Hi guys, today we are going to tell you a history that begins long before kingdoms, before written language, before history had a name. It is the story of the first great blacksmiths, not kings or warriors, but quiet early humans who learned how to bend the hardest materials on earth to their will. This is the story of how fire, stone, patience, and curiosity slowly gave birth to the very first weapons in human history, and how one simple discovery changed everything forever. Take a slow breath and imagine a world that is almost silent. No cities, no roads, no metal, only wind moving through tall grass, the crackle of fire at night, and small groups of humans trying to survive one day at a time. In this world, every tool matters, every mistake costs energy, every discovery can mean the difference between life and death. Long before the first blacksmith ever lifted a hammer, humans were already skilled tool makers. For hundreds of thousands of years, stone was their greatest ally. Sharp flakes of flint became knives, heavy stones became hammers, bones were shaped into needles and points. These tools were not made quickly or carelessly. They were shaped slowly with repeated strikes, careful observation, and deep familiarity with materials. In many ways, the mindset of blacksmithing had already begun, even though metal had not yet entered the human story. Fire was the first great teacher. At first, fire was something to fear. Wild, uncontrollable, dangerous. Lightning would strike trees, grasslands would burn, animals would flee. But over time, early humans learned to approach fire, to feed it, to protect it, and eventually to control it. Fire brought warmth, fire brought safety. Fire brought cooked food, which made bodies stronger and brains grow larger. Fire became the center of human life, and slowly, quietly, fire began to reveal secrets. Near certain rivers and rocky outcrops, humans noticed strange stones that behaved differently. Some were heavier than others, some glimmered faintly in the sunlight, some softened when placed near the hottest parts of the fire. These were not yet metals as we know them today, but they were hints, small clues scattered across the landscape. At first, these materials were curiosities, a shiny pebble, a heavy lump, something different. Early humans collected them not because they knew their purpose, but because they felt important. Humans have always been collectors of the unusual. The earliest metal humans likely encountered was native copper. Unlike iron, copper sometimes appears in nature in its pure metallic form. It does not look like stone. It does not fracture like flint, and when struck, instead of shattering, it bends. This bending was revolutionary. Imagine an early human striking a piece of copper with a stone hammer for the first time, expecting it to crack, expecting flakes. Instead, it deforms, it changes shape, it survives the blow. This moment, small, quiet, and undocumented, was one of the most important moments in human history. At first, copper was not forged into weapons. It was too soft, but it could be flattened into ornaments, rings, simple points. It could be shaped without breaking. This alone made it special. Copper objects carried status. They reflected light. They stood apart from stone tools, but copper had a weakness. When hammered too much, it became brittle. It cracked. Early humans didn't understand why, but they learned through experience. Too much force and the metal failed, too much cold hammering and it lost its strength. Then came another quiet discovery. If copper was heated in the fire and then hammered again, it became workable once more, softer, more obedient. Fire once again revealed its lesson. This process, heating and hammering, was the earliest form of metalworking. No theory, no science, only observation and memory. These early metal workers were not specialists yet. They were hunters, gatherers, parents, survivors, but among them some individuals showed greater patience, better hands, a deeper curiosity. They remembered what worked and what failed. They experimented when others rested. Slowly, knowledge accumulated. This was the birth of the first blacksmiths, not as a profession, but as a role. As generations passed, copper tools became more refined. Simple awls, hooks, blades that held an edge longer than stone, but copper alone could not dominate the world. It bent too easily, it dulled too fast. Stone still ruled the battlefield. Then came the accident that changed everything. Somewhere near a fire, copper-bearing rocks were heated alongside other minerals. Among them was tin, though no one knew its name. When these materials melted together, something new emerged. A metal harder than copper, stronger, more durable. This was bronze. The discovery of bronze was not planned. It was not intentional at first. It was the result of chance, repetition, and human attention. But once early metalworkers saw the difference, once they held a bronze blade and felt its strength, there was no going back. Bronze could cut deeper, it could hold an edge, it could survive impacts that would destroy stone or copper. The first true metal weapons were born not from conquest, but from curiosity. Early bronze weapons were simple, short blades, spear tips, axes. They were not ornate, they were functional, but their impact was enormous. Hunting became more efficient, warfare changed, power shifted, and with this shift the blacksmith's role transformed. No longer just a curious experimenter, the metalworker became essential. Villages depended on them. Leaders sought their skills. Knowledge became guarded. Techniques were passed down quietly, often within families. The forge became a sacred place, a space of fire, danger, and creation. But iron had not yet entered the world. Iron was everywhere, hidden in plain sight, locked inside rocks and soil. Unlike copper, it did not appear naturally in pure form. It required hotter fires, longer effort, greater understanding. For centuries, iron remained untouched, too stubborn, too demanding. Then once again, fire taught humans something new. Meteorites containing iron fell from the sky. These pieces of metal were unlike anything else, hard, heavy, sharp when shaped. Early humans believed iron came from the heavens, and in a way they were right. These celestial metals were shaped into blades, amulets, and tools of immense symbolic power. But meteorite iron was rare. The true mastery of iron required furnaces, charcoal, airflow, and patience. Early blacksmiths learned to build hotter fires by controlling oxygen. They learned to stack materials carefully. They learned that iron did not melt easily, but it could be softened, shaped, and strengthened through repeated heating and hammering. This knowledge came slowly, painfully slowly. Ironworking demanded precision. Too hot and the metal burned, too cold and it shattered. The blacksmith had to listen to the fire, watch the color of the metal, feel resistance through the hammer. This was not brute force. This was conversation. The first iron weapons were not perfect. They were uneven, impure, fragile at times, but they were stronger than bronze, and iron was abundant. This changed everything again. Iron weapons spread across continents. Blacksmiths became pillars of civilization. Empires rose not just through armies, but through forges. Yet behind all of this progress, the heart of blacksmithing remained unchanged. A human, a fire, a hammer, time. The first great blacksmiths were not famous. Their names are lost, but their legacy is everywhere, in every blade. Every tool, every piece of metal shaped by human hands. The sparks rise into the night, and as the fire slowly settles, we remain there with that early blacksmith, standing at the edge of something new. From this moment, the craft begins to deepen, not just as an experiment, but as a way of life. In the days that followed, blacksmithing was not a separate profession. It was woven into survival itself. The same hands that hunted animals and gathered plants were the hands that shaped metal. There were no workshops, no dedicated buildings, only open spaces near fires, sheltered from wind, close to water and stone. The forge, in its earliest form, was simply a place where fire burned longer and hotter than usual. Early humans began to notice patterns. Not every fire was the same. Fires fed with certain woods burned hotter. Fires protected from wind lasted longer. Fires built in shallow pits held heat more efficiently. These observations did not come from theory, but from long nights of watching flames and embers. Slowly, intentionally, humans began to shape fire itself. Charcoal became the next quiet breakthrough. By burning wood in low oxygen conditions, early humans created a fuel that burned hotter and cleaner than raw wood. They may not have understood chemistry, but they understood results. Charcoal made iron softer. Charcoal made copper easier to shape. Charcoal allowed control. And control was everything. With better fires came better tools. Stone hammers were refined. Some were shaped to fit the hand more comfortably. Others were weighted for power. Anvils were not yet metal. They were flat stones, tree stumps, or slabs of rock chosen for their hardness and stability. Every surface had a purpose. Every sound mattered. Blacksmiths learned to listen. The sound of hammer on metal told them when something was wrong. A dull thud meant the metal was too cold. A ringing tone meant it was ready. The color of heated metal became a language of its own: dull red, bright orange, yellow, white. These colors guided the hand long before temperature could be measured. Mistakes were constant. Metal cracked, blades warped, edges dulled too quickly. Many early weapons failed in the hunt or shattered in conflict, but each failure taught a lesson. The blacksmith remembered. The tribe remembered. Knowledge spread through stories, demonstrations, and imitation. This is how the first weapons truly evolved, not through sudden invention, but through countless small corrections. The earliest forged weapons were simple extensions of stone tools. Copper or bronze tips replaced stone points on spears. Metal edges reinforced wooden clubs. Knives became thinner, sharper, and more reliable. These weapons did not make humans invincible, but they gave them an edge, sometimes literally. With this edge came responsibility. Metal was valuable, time-consuming to produce. Dangerous to work with, not everyone could do it well. Gradually, certain individuals became known for their skill. They were sought out, respected, sometimes feared. The blacksmith was no longer just a tool maker, but a keeper of dangerous knowledge. In many early cultures, blacksmiths were seen as liminal figures standing between worlds. They controlled fire, shaped earth, and created objects that could both protect and kill. This gave rise to myths, taboos, and rituals surrounding the forge. Some believed blacksmiths spoke to spirits through flame. Others believed they borrowed power from the earth itself. Whether true or not, one thing was certain: the forge was not ordinary. As communities grew larger, blacksmithing became more specialized. Young individuals were chosen to learn the craft, often apprenticed to older smiths. Learning was slow. Years passed before a student could be trusted to forge a blade alone. Patience was taught before strength, observation before action. Step by step, the forging process became more refined. First came the gathering of materials. Ore was collected from riverbanks, cliffs, and shallow pits. These rocks were broken open, sorted, and tested in fire. Some produced metal, others were useless. Over time, blacksmiths learned which stones were worth the effort. Next came preparation. Ore was crushed, charcoal was produced. Fires were built carefully, layered with fuel and stone. Air was introduced using simple bellows made from animal skins. Each breath of air fed the fire, raising its heat. Then came the transformation. The ore did not melt completely. Instead, it softened, releasing metal in spongy masses called blooms. These blooms were full of impurities. Slag had to be hammered out. This required repeated heating and striking, folding the metal over itself again and again. Each fold made it stronger. Each strike removed weakness. This process was exhausting. Forging was not romantic. It was sweaty, dangerous, and physically demanding. Burns were common, injuries frequent, but the results were worth it. Slowly, iron bars took shape. From these bars, tools and weapons were born. Blades were forged longer now, edges sharper, points more precise. Balance mattered. A poorly balanced weapon tired the arm. A well-balanced one felt alive in the hand. Blacksmiths tested their creations constantly. They bent blades to check flexibility. They struck wood, bone, and stone. They refined shapes based on performance, not appearance. Beauty came later. As iron weapons spread, so did conflict. Communities with better weapons gained advantages. Borders shifted. Alliances formed. Raids became more effective. But iron also brought protection. Farmers defended fields. Villages fortified themselves. Survival improved. Still, the blacksmith remained at the center. Without the forge, weapons dulled and broke. Without maintenance, even iron failed. Blacksmiths repaired tools, reforged edges, and recycled broken metal. Nothing was wasted. Old blades became new ones. Metal carried memory. In some regions, styles emerged. Certain blade shapes became associated with specific tribes. Decorative elements appeared not for vanity, but for identification. A weapon told a story. It spoke of where it was made and by whom. And through all of this, blacksmiths continued to learn. They discovered plunging hot metal into water or oil to harden it. At first, this was unpredictable. Some blades became brittle and shattered, others became remarkably strong. Over time, smiths learned timing. They learned restraint. Hardness and flexibility had to be balanced. This balance mirrored life itself. Too rigid and you break, too soft and you fail. As night fell on ancient villages, the forge glowed softly. Children watched from a distance. Elders told stories. The rhythm of hammer and anvil became a heartbeat, steady, reassuring, familiar. The world was changing, but slowly. The first great blacksmiths did not know they were shaping history. They were shaping tools, they were solving problems, they were responding to the needs of their people. Yet every strike echoed forward in time. From here we moved deeper into the world that formed around the forge itself, where blacksmithing was no longer just an occasional task, but a rhythm that shaped daily life. As ironworking became more reliable, early settlements began to organize themselves around production. The forge was placed carefully, close to water for cooling, near clay-rich soil for furnace walls, and sheltered from strong winds that could steal heat or scatter sparks. Over time, these spaces became permanent. Stones were stacked, earth was packed. The forge stopped being temporary and became a fixed heart of the community. The blacksmith's day began early. Before the sun rose high, charcoal had to be prepared. Wood was gathered days in advance, stacked and burned slowly under controlled conditions. Too much air and the wood became ash, too little and it remained unburned. The blacksmith learned patience here before ever lifting a hammer. Charcoal was precious and waste was unforgivable. Ore followed. Iron-rich stones were collected from familiar places, riverbeds where water revealed dark, heavy rocks, or shallow pits where generations had already dug. These sites were guarded by knowledge rather than walls. Outsiders might see only stones. The blacksmith saw potential. Once gathered, ore was crushed with stone hammers, broken into smaller pieces that could release their metal more easily. This work was slow and repetitive. It was often done by apprentices whose first lessons were not in forging but in endurance. Learning blacksmithing took years. Apprentices watched long before they acted. They learned how to judge fire by color, how to sense heat without touching, how to recognize the smell of burning impurities. They learned when to speak and when to remain silent. The forge demanded focus, and distraction could ruin hours of work. Only after trust was earned did an apprentice strike metal. The first blows were light and uncertain. Hammering was not about force but rhythm. Each strike needed intention. The blacksmith taught through example, not explanation. Words were limited. Demonstration was everything. Over time, apprentices learned to shape bars into useful forms. Nails, hooks, simple blades, mistakes were corrected immediately. A poorly struck edge could weaken an entire weapon. There was no room for carelessness. Blacksmithing shaped bodies as much as metal. Arms grew strong, shoulders broadened, hands became scarred and steady, heat tolerance increased, pain became familiar but manageable. This physical transformation mirrored an internal one: patience, discipline, respect for process. Within the community, the blacksmith occupied a unique position. They were not leaders, but leaders relied on them. They were not warriors, but warriors depended on them. Their work touched every life. Plows, axes, knives, and weapons all passed through their hands. When tools failed, the blacksmith was called. When new challenges arose, the blacksmith was consulted. Trust was essential. Because metal meant power, blacksmiths often followed strict customs. Some only worked at certain times. Others performed rituals before forging weapons. These practices reinforced respect and caution. Fire could not be treated casually. As ironworking spread, trade followed. Blacksmiths exchanged tools and weapons for food, animals, and protection. Some traveled between settlements, carrying techniques with them. Others stayed rooted, becoming known for distinctive styles. Slowly, networks formed, invisible lines of knowledge stretching across regions. These exchanges brought variation. Different regions developed different forging methods. Some favored thicker blades, others preferred lighter ones. Local resources influenced outcomes. Iron from one area behaved differently than iron from another. Blacksmiths adapted, always adjusting. And then came refinement. Edges became sharper through better grinding. Handles were shaped for comfort. Balance improved. Weapons were no longer just functional, they were efficient. A well-made blade reduced fatigue. It struck true, it lasted longer. Testing became ritualized. Blades were bent, twisted, struck against wood and bone. Only those that survived were kept, others were reforged. Failure was not shameful, it was expected. Through this process, knowledge accumulated. Blacksmiths learned about hardening and tempering with greater consistency. They learned that reheating a quenched blade could reduce brittleness. They learned that timing mattered, seconds mattered. This understanding was not written. It lived in memory, muscle, and instinct. As centuries passed, blacksmithing influenced social structure. Certain families became known for the craft. Skills were inherited. Outsiders were rarely taught fully. Knowledge became lineage. Weapons now carried identity. A blade could be recognized by its shape, its markings, its balance. It told others where it came from. It told enemies what kind of resistance to expect. Yet blacksmiths themselves remained grounded. Their lives were simple: work, rest, observe, repeat. The forge demanded routine. There was little room for excess. Fire punished arrogance quickly. At night, after the forge cooled, blacksmiths inspected their work. Edges were checked, handles tightened, tools were arranged carefully. Order mattered. Tomorrow depended on today's preparation. In quiet moments, they thought about improvement. Could the blade be lighter? Could the edge last longer? Could the fire burn hotter without consuming more fuel? Progress was constant but slow. There were no breakthroughs without effort, and while blacksmiths shaped metal, metal shaped society. Communities grew more stable, food production increased, defense improved, tools reduced labor. Life expectancy slowly rose, all of this traced back in part to the forge. From this quiet order around the forge, the world beyond the village begins to shift, slowly at first, then with growing momentum. What was once local knowledge starts to travel farther than footsteps alone. As populations expanded and groups moved in search of land, water, and safety, blacksmithing traveled with them. A forge could be rebuilt anywhere fire and stone existed, but the knowledge to make it work was far rarer. When a skilled blacksmith joined a migrating group, they carried more than tools, they carried advantage. Some blacksmiths left willingly, others were taken by force. In times of conflict, capturing a blacksmith could be more valuable than capturing land. Without a smith, weapons dulled, tools failed, and power weakened. This reality changed the rules of warfare long before armies grew large. As contact between groups increased, blacksmiths encountered unfamiliar methods, a different way to shape a blade, a new approach to airflow, a unique quenching liquid. These meetings were moments of tension and opportunity. Sometimes knowledge was shared, sometimes it was hidden. Sometimes it was stolen through observation alone. Progress accelerated, ironworking techniques became more consistent. Furnaces grew taller, trapping heat more effectively. Bellows improved, allowing longer and hotter burns. Blacksmiths learned to work iron in stages, separating refining from shaping. This reduced waste and improved quality. With these improvements came stronger weapons. Swords emerged slowly from knives and daggers. Early swords were short, heavy, and practical. They were not symbols yet, they were tools of survival. Their design evolved through use. A sword that broke was abandoned. A sword that survived was copied. Balance became critical. Blacksmiths learned that moving weight closer to the handle improved control. They learned that tapering a blade increased speed without sacrificing strength. Each improvement was small, but together they transformed combat. As weapons improved, so did armor. Metal plates reinforced leather. Helmets appeared. Shields gained metal edges. This cycle, weapon improving armor, armor driving better weapons, pushed blacksmiths to innovate constantly. The forge became a place of problem solving under pressure, yet not all weapons were for war. Hunting tools improved alongside blades. Arrowheads became more uniform. Spear tips were shaped for penetration rather than brute force. Traps incorporated metal triggers. Food became more reliable, supporting larger populations. With larger populations came hierarchy. Leaders demanded superior weapons. Elites were armed differently. Ornamentation appeared not just for beauty, but for status. A decorated blade signaled authority. Blacksmiths now forged symbols as well as steel. This changed their relationship with power. Some blacksmiths worked directly for leaders, protected and supplied in exchange for loyalty. Others remained independent, serving entire communities. This choice shaped their safety and influence. Working for power brought protection, but also risk. As weapons became more refined, stories began to form around them. A blade that never chipped, a spear that always struck true. These stories spread, growing with each retelling. Over time, the line between craftsmanship and legend blurred, but behind every story was a blacksmith who understood process, not myth, heat, hammer, time. Blacksmiths experimented with folding metal, layering iron of different qualities. This improved strength and flexibility. Each fold trapped impurities and distributed carbon more evenly. The process was slow and exhausting, but the results were undeniable. These techniques were guarded closely. Apprentices swore loyalty. Families kept secrets. Some methods were taught only to one successor. Knowledge became currency. Losing it meant losing relevance. As trade routes expanded, metals traveled farther. Tin, copper, and iron moved across landscapes. Blacksmiths adapted to new materials, learning their quirks. Not all iron was equal. Some resisted shaping, others responded beautifully. Recognizing quality became a skill of its own. The forge grew louder, hotter, busier. Multiple assistants worked together. One managed the fire, one worked the bellows, one struck while the master guided shape and form. Blacksmithing became cooperative. Rhythm mattered more than ever. This cooperation extended beyond the forge. Communities organized schedules around metal work. Certain days were reserved for forging, others for repair. The sound of hammering became part of daily life, signaling productivity and safety. But progress came with cost. Deforestation increased as charcoal demand grew. Mines scarred landscapes. Warfare intensified. Blacksmiths were not responsible for these outcomes, but their work enabled them. This weighed heavily on some. Others accepted it as inevitable. Still, the forge remained neutral. It responded only to skill and attention. Fire did not care about intention. Metal did not bend for ambition. The blacksmith had to remain present, focused, disciplined. As generations passed, blacksmithing traditions deepened. Songs were sung to maintain rhythm. Marks were stamped into blades to claim authorship. Identity became permanent. And somewhere along the way, certain blades truly did stand apart. Not because they were magical, but because they were made by masters who understood balance at the deepest level. These blades survived decades of use. They were passed down, repaired, reforged, each time gaining history. The blacksmith is no longer an anonymous figure working quietly at the edge of the village. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the craft begins to attach itself to names, reputations, and memory. As societies grow more complex, records begin to appear, not detailed manuals of forging, but stories, tallies, and oral traditions that remember who made what. A blade that saved a leader's life is remembered. A spear that never failed in battle is spoken of. And behind each object, a blacksmith's name begins to surface. This is not fame as we understand it today. It is recognition rooted in trust. A named blacksmith is one whose work has been tested repeatedly. Their weapons have endured stress, weather, impact, and time. Their tools have fed families and defended homes. Their reputation spread slowly, carried by traders, travelers, and warriors who have survived because of their craft. With reputation comes pressure. A master blacksmith cannot afford failure. Each new weapon must meet expectation. This pushes refinement even further. Masters begin to reject apprentices who lack patience. Training becomes stricter. Standards rise. Workspaces change. Forges are expanded and improved. Stone walls reflect heat. Chimneys guide smoke. Furnaces are rebuilt taller and deeper. Temperature control becomes more precise. Blacksmiths learn to maintain consistent heat over long periods, a requirement for high-quality blades. Metal preparation becomes ritualized. Iron is sorted by quality. Impurities are anticipated. Slag is removed more thoroughly. Folding techniques are refined, not just to strengthen metal, but to standardize it. The blade must behave predictably. At this stage, blacksmiths begin to specialize. Some focus on weapons only, others on tools. A few dedicate themselves to armor. This specialization allows deeper understanding. Weaponsmiths learn how blades respond to impact. Toolsmiths learn durability and edge retention. Armor smiths learn how metal distributes force. Each specialty feeds the others. Weapon design evolves alongside armor. Blades become longer, thinner, more flexible. Points are refined for penetration. Edges are sharpened with greater care. Grinding stones are improved. Polishing removes imperfections that could cause fractures. Quenching methods become deliberate. Water, oil, and even animal fats are tested. Each produces a different result. Blacksmiths learn that the same blade, quenched differently, becomes a different weapon entirely. This knowledge is guarded fiercely. Temper is everything. A blade too hard will shatter. A blade too soft will bend. The perfect balance exists only within a narrow window. Achieving it requires experience, attention, and intuition built over years. This is where legendary weapons truly begin, not in myth but in mastery. Blades forged at this level feel different. They move smoothly through the air. They strike with efficiency rather than force. They last. Owners notice. Stories follow. As these weapons circulate, blacksmiths are summoned across regions. Some travel under protection. Others are brought gifts and offered land. The forge becomes a place of negotiation, not just creation, but with recognition comes danger. Rival leaders seek exclusive access. Enemies attempt sabotage. Blacksmiths must protect their knowledge and their lives. Some relocate frequently. Others fortify their forges. Trust becomes selective. Despite this, the core of the craft remains unchanged. The forge still demands silence at critical moments. The hammer still follows rhythm. The fire still teaches through color and sound. Technology advances, but fundamentals remain constant. Apprentices at this level undergo harsh training. They are tested under fatigue. They are corrected relentlessly. They are required to repeat tasks until perfection is achieved without conscious thought. Only then are they allowed to attempt full weapons. Even then, their work is scrutinized. A master will break a flawed blade without hesitation. Metal is precious, but standards are higher. Failure is not personal, it is instruction. Communities now depend heavily on blacksmiths. Agriculture relies on metal tools. Construction uses metal fasteners. Warfare depends on superior weapons. The blacksmith touches every aspect of life. This dependence creates stability but also vulnerability. If a forge is destroyed, recovery is slow. Skills cannot be replaced quickly. This makes blacksmiths strategic targets in conflict. Protecting them becomes a priority. As generations pass, blacksmithing knowledge deepens further. Patterns are repeated, techniques are refined, certain blade shapes become iconic, cultural identity attaches to metalwork. A weapon now says something about where it was made and how its people live. And through all of this, the blacksmith remains at the center, not as a ruler, but as a foundation. The craft of blacksmithing begins to reflect the cultures that practice it. The forge does not exist in isolation anymore. It absorbs beliefs, environments, and values, shaping metal in ways that mirror the people who wield it. As civilizations rise, blacksmithing adapts to geography. In forested regions, charcoal is abundant, allowing longer burns and thicker blades. In arid lands, fuel is scarce, so efficiency becomes critical. Forges are built smaller, fires are conserved, and blades are designed to use less metal without sacrificing strength. Climate influences everything. In cold regions, metal must resist brittleness. Blacksmiths favor flexibility, tempering blades to withstand freezing conditions. In humid climates, corrosion becomes a constant enemy. Protective coatings and careful storage emerge as solutions. Every environment teaches a different lesson. Cultural needs shape weapons. Some societies favor spears for formation fighting. Others develop curved blades for swift movement. Some prioritize armor-piercing points. These choices are not random. They arise from terrain, tactics, and tradition. Blacksmiths respond. They adjust blade curvature, they alter thickness, they change balance points. Over time, regional styles become unmistakable. A weapon's silhouette alone can reveal its origin. This diversity accelerates innovation. As trade and conflict bring cultures into contact, blacksmiths observe foreign weapons closely. They test captured blades, they study damage patterns, they learn from success and failure alike. No knowledge is wasted. Some techniques merge. A folding method from one region combines with a quenching practice from another. The result is something new, stronger, more reliable. Progress is no longer isolated, it is collective, even if unacknowledged. As writing becomes more common, blacksmithing enters record in fragments, not instructions but references. A king rewards a smith, a treaty demands weapons, a legend praises a blade's resilience. These mentions confirm what was already known: blacksmiths are essential. Still, most knowledge remains unwritten. It lives in practice, passed from hand to hand. This protects it from misuse, but also limits its spread. Only those willing to endure the forge can learn its truths. As societies stabilize, blacksmiths gain workshops, assistance, and resources. Production increases. Standardization begins. Weapons are made in sets. Tools follow patterns. This consistency strengthens armies and economies alike, yet masters resist full uniformity. They know that metal is never identical. Each piece must be read, not forced. Flexibility in approach remains vital. At the same time, symbolic metalwork grows. Weapons are engraved, handles are inlaid, armor bears marks of rank. These details do not weaken function, they reinforce identity. A weapon becomes an extension of its bearer. Blacksmiths now work closely with warriors. Feedback is immediate. A blade slips, a grip fails, an edge dulls too quickly. The blacksmith listens and adjusts. This dialogue refines design further. War accelerates change. Conflict demands efficiency. Waste is reduced. Repairs are prioritized. Blacksmiths learn to work quickly without sacrificing quality. Mobile forges appear, traveling with armies. The craft becomes adaptable, but war also reveals limits. Mass production sacrifices perfection. Some blades fail sooner. Blacksmiths struggle to maintain standards under pressure. This tension shapes future approaches. Peace brings reflection. After conflict, blacksmiths analyze what worked. They improve. They prepare for what comes next. The forge becomes a place of learning as much as creation. Through centuries of repetition, certain principles solidify. Balance matters more than size. Control matters more than force. Patience outperforms haste. These truths become unspoken laws of the craft. As blacksmithing matures, it influences philosophy. The forge becomes a metaphor for discipline, transformation, and restraint. Metal teaches humans about themselves. What resists must be understood, not broken. Blacksmithing enters a long and deliberate phase of refinement, where progress is no longer driven by discovery alone, but by mastery. The fundamentals are known. Fire, iron, air, and time have revealed their rules. What remains is the pursuit of consistency, reliability, and excellence across generations. The forge becomes quieter in its intent, but deeper in its discipline. Blacksmiths at this stage no longer experiment recklessly. Each action has precedent. Each technique has lineage. Knowledge is layered, built upon the experience of countless hands that came before. A master does not ask whether something can be done, but how well it can be done and how reliably it can be repeated. Iron production becomes more organized. Bloomery furnaces are improved and multiplied. Smelting sites are chosen carefully, often near ore sources to reduce transport. Entire operations emerge around extraction, refinement, and distribution. Blacksmiths are now part of a larger system that includes miners, charcoal burners, transporters, and guards. This system brings stability. With steady access to materials, blacksmiths can focus on quality rather than scarcity. They take time to refine edges. They reject flawed iron early. Waste is minimized through experience, not desperation. At the forge, processes become methodical. Metal is heated evenly, rotated carefully, struck in measured rhythm. The hammer no longer fights the metal, it guides it. Each blow has purpose. Each pause is intentional. Apprenticeship evolves as well. Training becomes structured. Young apprentices begin with cleaning, pumping bellows, and preparing charcoal. Only after years do they shape metal. Even then, their work is limited to simple forms. Mastery is earned slowly through repetition rather than instruction. Mistakes are fewer now, but more costly. A flawed blade at this level represents not ignorance but negligence. Standards are unforgiving. Masters inspect every detail. A slight imbalance is corrected. A hidden crack is grounds for reforging. Nothing leaves the forge unfinished. Blades themselves grow more sophisticated. Edges are thinner yet stronger. Profiles are refined for specific uses. Some blades are optimized for slashing, others for thrusting. Weight distribution is carefully tuned. A weapon must feel like a natural extension of the body. Blacksmiths develop a deep understanding of steel. They learn how carbon content affects hardness. They recognize the sound of good steel when struck. They sense resistance through the hammer. This knowledge is not intellectual, it is embodied. Heat treatment becomes precise. Quenching is timed by color, not clocks. Tempering is done by feel. Blades are reheated gently to release internal stress. This balance between hardness and flexibility is achieved consistently now, not by chance. This is the age of reliable excellence. Weapons produced during this period do not merely survive, they endure. They are repaired, reforged, and passed down. Their value lies not in decoration, but in trust. A warrior trusts their blade with their life. As this trust grows, so does dependence. Armies rely on blacksmiths to maintain readiness. Tools keep infrastructure functioning. Agriculture benefits from durable implements. Society's rhythm aligns with the forge's output. Blacksmiths become essential infrastructure. Some are supported directly by rulers. Others operate independently but under protection. Their safety is prioritized, their work respected. The forge becomes a place of negotiation, planning, and continuity. With stability comes specialization at unprecedented levels. Some blacksmiths focus exclusively on swordsmithing, others on armor. Others on tools or horseshoes. This allows deeper understanding and refinement. Each specialty pushes boundaries within its domain. Swordsmiths, in particular, reach remarkable heights. They refine blade geometry to reduce drag. They experiment with fuller grooves to reduce weight without weakening structure. They adjust cross-sections to improve cutting efficiency. These changes are subtle but transformative. Testing becomes systematic. Blades are flexed repeatedly. They are struck against controlled surfaces. They are examined for microfractures. Only those that pass rigorous testing are deemed complete. Failures are studied, not discarded. A broken blade is analyzed. The grain of the metal is examined. Heat treatment is reconsidered. Each failure improves future work. Through this process, consistency becomes legendary. Certain regions become known for superior blades. Their methods are not entirely secret, but their execution is unmatched. Skill, not information, becomes the barrier. This distinction is critical. Many know the steps. Few can perform them flawlessly. Mastery is not knowing what to do, it is knowing when and how. As trade networks expand, these renowned blades travel far. They are exchanged for goods, alliances, and protection. They become symbols of connection between distant cultures. A blade forged in one land may serve in another, carrying technique across borders. This exchange accelerates evolution. Blacksmiths encounter unfamiliar designs and adapt them. A new guard shape improves hand protection. A new pommel design improves balance. These innovations spread organically, shaped by use rather than theory. Meanwhile, armor evolves alongside weapons. Plates are shaped to deflect blows. Joints are reinforced. Weight is distributed to preserve mobility. Blacksmiths work closely with armorers, aligning materials and techniques. This co-evolution sharpens expertise. A sword must defeat armor. Armor must resist swords. Blacksmiths adjust accordingly. Edge angles change, impact points shift, materials improve. The forge becomes a site of constant refinement. But even at this height, limitations remain. Iron quality varies, fuel availability fluctuates, human fatigue sets boundaries. Blacksmiths work within constraints, not beyond them. This humility preserves longevity. Time remains central. Great blades are not rushed. Some take weeks, others months. Cooling, reheating, grinding, polishing, each stage requires patience. Rushing invites failure. This patience defines the era. Blacksmiths are no longer pioneers discovering unknown elements. They are custodians of a refined craft, preserving and advancing it incrementally. Their lives reflect this mindset. Days are structured. Work begins and ends with intention. Tools are maintained meticulously. Disorder is avoided. The forge reflects the blacksmith's discipline. Even rest is purposeful. Hands recover. Muscles relax. Observation continues. Improvement never stops. As centuries pass, the craft reaches a plateau of excellence that will endure for generations. Not because progress stops, but because balance is achieved. Function, durability, and efficiency align. Further improvement becomes incremental rather than revolutionary. This is the quiet triumph of blacksmithing, not loud innovation but sustained mastery. The world begins to change again, not suddenly, not violently, but gradually in ways that are almost invisible at first. The forge still burns, the hammer still falls, but the rhythm of society around it begins to shift. Population centers grow larger. Villages become towns, towns become cities. With this growth comes complexity, and with complexity comes new demands on the blacksmith that go far beyond weapons alone. Metal is no longer only about survival and war, it becomes about structure. Buildings grow taller, gates become heavier. Locks, hinges, nails, chains, brackets, and supports are required in numbers never seen before. The blacksmith's work expands into architecture, security, and daily urban life. Iron holds doors shut, bridges together, and marketplaces safe. This changes priorities. Where once the finest blade was the highest achievement, now reliability and volume matter just as much. A city needs thousands of identical nails more than one perfect sword. Blacksmiths adapt, learning to produce standardized items efficiently without sacrificing strength. Workshops grow larger, multiple forges operate at once, specialized stations appear, one area for shaping, one for grinding, one for finishing. Assistants handle repetitive tasks while masters oversee quality. The forge becomes a coordinated space rather than a solitary one. This coordination requires leadership. Senior blacksmiths now manage people as much as metal. They assign tasks, inspect work, resolve disputes, and maintain schedules. Skill alone is no longer enough. Organization becomes essential. Guilds begin to form. Blacksmiths band together to protect their trade, regulate standards, and control training. Membership becomes a mark of legitimacy. Outsiders are excluded. Apprenticeships are formalized. Knowledge is guarded collectively. These guilds stabilize the craft. They ensure consistent quality. They prevent undercutting. They provide mutual protection in times of conflict, but they also slow change. Innovation must pass tradition's scrutiny. Within guilds, hierarchy matters. Apprentices serve years. Journeymen travel to learn from different masters. Only after proving skill and discipline does one earn the title of master. This process preserves standards, but it is demanding. Journeymen bring new ideas. As they travel, they carry techniques between regions. A quenching method learned in one city is tested in another. A forging rhythm observed elsewhere is adopted or rejected. This movement keeps the craft alive. Still, change is cautious. Blacksmiths are conservative by necessity. Metal punishes mistakes. Fire does not forgive arrogance. New methods are tested slowly, often on lesser tools, before being trusted with critical work. Meanwhile, warfare evolves again. Larger armies demand uniform weapons. Logistics become as important as skill. Blacksmiths now supply not individuals but forces. This shifts focus from uniqueness to consistency. Standard patterns emerge, sword lengths are fixed, spearheads are shaped to uniform dimensions, armor components are interchangeable. This allows faster repair and replacement. Blacksmiths learn to work to specification. This standardization is powerful. It allows armies to function efficiently. It reduces training time, it simplifies maintenance, but it also reduces individuality. Blades become tools of systems rather than personal extensions. Some blacksmiths resist this change. They continue to forge custom weapons for those who can afford them. Nobles, champions, and leaders still demand exceptional work. These commissions keep artistry alive, thus the craft splits. One path leads toward production and infrastructure. The other preserves high-level artistry and specialization. Both are necessary, both shape the future. As tools diversify, blacksmiths produce farming equipment, construction hardware, carts, and mechanisms. Metal enters everyday life fully. People touch iron constantly, often without thinking about it. This familiarity changes perception. Metal is no longer mysterious, it is expected. This reduces the aura around blacksmiths but increases reliance on them. Their work becomes invisible yet indispensable. The forge becomes quieter in reputation, louder in workload. Blacksmiths work long hours, demand is constant, repairs never stop, wear and tear is relentless. The craft becomes physically taxing in new ways. At the same time, new materials appear. Steel improves, alloying becomes more deliberate. Blacksmiths experiment with controlled carbon content more consistently. Results become predictable. This predictability enables planning. Large projects become feasible. Bridges, gates, defensive structures, and machines rely on metal components that must perform reliably over time. Blacksmiths become engineers in practice, if not in name. Mechanical devices appear. Pulleys, gears, hinges, and locking mechanisms require precision. Blacksmiths learn to work to tighter tolerances. Measurement becomes more important. Simple tools for gauging length and thickness are developed. Precision changes the craft. Where once feel and instinct dominated, now alignment and accuracy matter deeply. A misaligned hinge fails, a poorly fitted lock jams. Blacksmiths refine their attention to detail further. Training adapts again. Apprentices learn measurement alongside hammering. They learn geometry through practice. Shapes are planned before being forged. This mental shift is significant. Despite all this, the forge's core remains unchanged. Fire still demands respect. Metal still responds to heat and force the same way it always has. The blacksmith's body still learns through repetition. Time continues to be the greatest tool. Rushing still ruins work. Patience still defines success. As centuries pass, the blacksmith's role becomes more stable but less central in storytelling. Other professions rise. Merchants, scholars, administrators gain prominence. The blacksmith works steadily in the background, yet when metal fails, everyone notices. A broken gate invites danger. A snapped tool halts work. A dull weapon risks lives. In these moments, the blacksmith's importance is undeniable. The craft endures because it adapts. It absorbs new demands without abandoning old truths. It scales without losing discipline. It becomes broader, not weaker. The blacksmith's senses change long before it is fully understood. The fire still burns, the hammer still falls, but the world around the forge begins to hum with new ideas, new pressures, and new rhythms that do not originate from iron alone. The first signs are subtle. Water wheels appear along rivers, turning steadily day and night. At first, they grind grain or lift water, but their constant motion inspires curiosity. If water can turn stone endlessly, could it also move hammers? Could it power bellows? These questions linger quietly in the minds of observant blacksmiths. Some begin to experiment. Simple mechanisms are built. A wheel turns a shaft. The shaft lifts a hammer and lets it fall. At first, these water-powered hammers are crude and unreliable. They break, they misalign, they lack finesse, but they do something human arms cannot. They strike endlessly without fatigue. This changes scale. Large pieces of metal that once required teams of smiths can now be worked more easily. Repetition becomes effortless. The sound of forging changes. The rhythm is no longer human heartbeat alone, but mechanical persistence. Blacksmiths respond cautiously. They do not abandon hand forging. They use machines where strength is needed and hands where judgment matters. The craft becomes hybrid, part muscle, part mechanism. This blending marks a turning point. Productivity increases, output grows, costs fall, more metal enters circulation, infrastructure expands faster. Cities reinforce walls, gates, and bridges with confidence. Yet something is lost. The intimacy between hammer and metal weakens slightly. The smith no longer feels every blow. Control shifts. Precision must be regained through adjustment rather than instinct. Skilled blacksmiths adapt best. They learn to tune machines. They adjust cams and levers. They listen to new sounds, interpreting them as carefully as they once interpreted ringing steel. Mastery shifts from pure physicality to systems thinking. This requires a different mindset. Understanding motion, force, and timing becomes as important as understanding heat and hardness. The blacksmith's knowledge broadens again. Meanwhile, furnaces evolve. Airflow improves. Chimneys are redesigned. Bellows become larger and more efficient. Some are powered mechanically. Higher temperatures become achievable more consistently. This allows better steel production. Steel quality rises. Carbon content is controlled more deliberately. Reproducibility improves. Blades, tools, and structural components behave predictably. This reliability accelerates construction and manufacturing. With better steel comes new applications. Springs appear in mechanisms. Fine tools enable precision crafts. Clocks, locks, and instruments rely on carefully forged components. Blacksmiths now contribute to timekeeping, security, and science itself. The forge becomes quieter in one sense, louder in another, less brute force, more precision, less spectacle. More integration. As production grows, demand grows with it. Cities expand, trade intensifies, roads improve. Carts and wagons require constant maintenance. Horseshoes are needed in enormous numbers. Blacksmiths produce relentlessly. Fatigue becomes structural. Long hours strain bodies, soot fills lungs, heat exhausts. Some blacksmiths age quickly. Others innovate to reduce strain, redesigning workflows and tools to preserve strength. This necessity drives ergonomics before the word exists. Handles are shaped better, work heights are adjusted, tasks are divided. The craft learns to protect its practitioners. At the same time, social perception shifts again. Blacksmiths are no longer mysterious figures of myth. They are skilled workers, respected but familiar. Their knowledge is valuable but no longer singular. Other trades rise. Founders cast metal in molds. Machinists shape components with cutting tools. Engineers design structures on parchment. The blacksmith is no longer alone in shaping metal's future. This creates tension. Some blacksmiths resist these changes, clinging to traditional methods. Others embrace them, expanding their skills. The craft begins to diverge internally. Those who adapt survive best. They learn casting basics. They work with engineers. They repair machines. They integrate rather than isolate. Their forges become hubs of problem solving. Those who resist narrow their focus. They produce specialized items. Artistic metalwork, custom blades, unique pieces that machines cannot replicate. Their value lies in individuality. Both paths are valid. Together they preserve the soul of blacksmithing while allowing it to evolve. As knowledge spreads more freely through writing and diagrams, secrecy fades, techniques are recorded, instructions circulate, apprentices learn faster, the barrier to entry lowers. This democratizes skill but also intensifies competition. Quality becomes the differentiator. Not everyone who can forge well. Mastery remains rare. Discipline still matters. As time advances, energy sources diversify. Coal replaces charcoal in some regions. It burns hotter and longer but introduces impurities. Blacksmiths adapt furnaces again, learning to manage new challenges. This adaptability defines the craft. No fuel is perfect. No material is ideal. The blacksmith learns to work with what exists, not what is wished for. Through all of this, the forge remains a place of learning. Young apprentices still begin with cleaning and observation. Hands still blister, metal still resists, fire still teaches humility. But the world outside accelerates. Production increases beyond local needs. Goods are shipped long distances. Standardization deepens. The blacksmith's work becomes part of systems too large to see fully. This creates distance. A smith may never meet the end user of their work. A hinge forged today may be installed miles away by someone unknown. This anonymity contrasts sharply with earlier eras. Some blacksmiths feel this loss, others accept it as progress. As centuries move forward, new technologies loom, not yet dominant but approaching. Smelting grows more industrial, rolling mills appear. Metal can be shaped without hammering at all. These developments do not erase blacksmithing immediately. They coexist. Hand forging remains superior for certain tasks. Repairs, custom work, and adjustments still require skilled hands. Machines cannot adapt instinctively, yet the writing is on the wall. The role of the blacksmith is changing from central producer to specialist and maintainer. This transition is not abrupt, it unfolds over generations. A master teaches an apprentice differently than they were taught. Skills shift, priorities realign. Still, the essence survives, understanding material, respecting process, working patiently. Solving problems through heat and force. These principles remain timeless. Where tradition meets transformation, we slow our pace and look more closely, because understanding deepens not by rushing forward, but by carefully examining what is changing and why. This is the moment where blacksmithing does not disappear, but stretches itself wider, becoming more complex, more layered, and more deeply intertwined with the world than ever before. The forge, once a simple place of fire and stone, now becomes a system. To understand this shift fully, we must return to the core question blacksmiths have always asked, even if silently. How do we move metal with the least waste, the greatest control, and the most reliability? Every new development answers this question in a different way. Water-powered hammers are no longer curiosities now. They are refined machines. Their timing is adjusted through cams. Their force is regulated through counterweights. Blacksmiths learn that power without control destroys metal, while controlled power reveals its strength. The machine does not replace skill, it magnifies it. An unskilled operator ruins material faster than ever. A skilled one achieves results previously impossible. This forces a mental shift. The blacksmith must now think ahead. Before metal ever touches fire, the process is planned. How many heats will be needed? Which steps require machine force? which require hand correction. This planning becomes as important as hammering itself. Forges grow larger and more organized. Raw materials are stored separately. Finished goods are stacked systematically. Workflows are arranged to minimize wasted movement. Efficiency becomes a craft of its own. Every step saved preserves energy, time, and metal. This organization changes training. Apprentices are no longer taught only how to strike. They are taught how to observe systems. They learn why certain tasks are grouped, why some processes happen before others, why mistakes cascade through a workflow. Understanding replaces imitation as the foundation of learning. Metal science deepens even without formal theory. Blacksmiths observe that steel behaves differently based on origin. Some iron hardens easily, some resists. They correlate this with ore source, fuel type, and furnace temperature. Over time, patterns emerge. These patterns are remembered, shared, and refined. Carbon becomes more than an accident, it becomes a variable. Blacksmiths learn to introduce it intentionally through prolonged heating in carbon-rich environments. They learn to reduce it through repeated folding. Control increases, predictability follows. This predictability allows ambition. Blacksmiths attempt more complex shapes. Curves, tapers, hollow sections, and reinforced edges become achievable with confidence. Metal is no longer fought, it is guided. Decorative work expands alongside function. As survival becomes less immediate for many, beauty regains importance. Gates are embellished, railings are shaped into flowing forms, tools are marked not only for ownership but for pride. Blacksmiths learn that decoration, when done correctly, does not weaken structure. It can even strengthen it by redistributing stress. This requires new skills: scrolling iron without cracking it, twisting bars evenly, creating symmetry by eye. These tasks demand patience and spatial awareness. The blacksmith becomes part artist, part engineer. Large projects redefine scale. Churches, halls, bridges, and fortifications require massive quantities of metalwork. Blacksmiths coordinate with masons, carpenters, and planners. The forge becomes one voice in a larger conversation. Metal must fit stone, wood, and human movement. Tolerance matters now. A hinge must align perfectly with a door frame. A bracket must bear load without flexing. Precision moves from preference to necessity. Measuring tools improve, templates are used. Repetition increases accuracy. This introduces a subtle tension. Standardization improves efficiency but risks dulling judgment. The best blacksmiths learn to use standards as guides, not crutches. They know when to deviate because no two situations are identical. Meanwhile, specialization deepens further. Some blacksmiths focus entirely on architectural iron, others on agricultural tools, others on weapon repair rather than production. This allows extraordinary depth of expertise. A toolsmith understands wear patterns intimately. An armorer understands impact physics through experience. Communication between specialists becomes essential. A weapon design must consider available steel. An armor plate must consider the weapons it will face. Blacksmiths discuss, debate, and adjust. Knowledge becomes collective rather than solitary. Despite increasing complexity, the forge remains grounded in sensory awareness. Color still guides heat, sound still reveals flaws, resistance still communicates readiness. Machines do not replace these signals, they amplify the consequences of ignoring them. Mistakes become more expensive. A flaw in a large structure risks collapse. A weak link compromises an entire system. Responsibility weighs heavier. Blacksmiths develop habits of inspection, testing, and verification. They test not just objects, but processes. If a method fails once, it is revised. If it fails twice, it is abandoned. Reliability becomes the highest virtue. At the same time, the social identity of the blacksmith shifts again. They are now tradespeople within a network, not solitary masters. Their success depends on coordination. Their reputation spreads through institutions as much as individuals. Guilds evolve accordingly. Rules expand. Quality controls are enforced. Disputes are arbitrated. Training standards are formalized. This protects the craft, but also binds it. Innovation continues, but carefully. Radical change is rare, incremental improvement dominates. This ensures stability but slows leaps forward. Still, progress accumulates quietly. Energy sources diversify further. Coal usage spreads, coke appears, furnaces are redesigned again. Each fuel introduces new challenges. Sulfur contamination, temperature spikes. Blacksmiths respond through lining materials, airflow adjustments, and process changes. This constant adaptation sharpens judgment. No single method works everywhere. The blacksmith learns to evaluate context first, technique second. This flexibility preserves relevance. The human body remains central. Despite machines, forging is still demanding. Blacksmiths learn to pace themselves. Rest becomes strategic. Nutrition matters. Injury prevention becomes part of craft knowledge. This awareness extends to apprentices. Training emphasizes longevity. Overexertion is discouraged. Skill is built gradually. Craft recognizes that burning out talent is wasteful. As metalwork permeates daily life, people begin to forget its origins. Iron objects become ordinary. Hinges, nails, tools are taken for granted. Few consider the fire, effort, and knowledge behind them. This invisibility is both a loss and a testament to success. The craft has integrated so fully that it disappears into normalcy. Yet in moments of failure, its importance reemerges. A broken mechanism halts production. A failed structure causes harm. Suddenly, metal matters again. Blacksmiths are called. Solutions are demanded. These moments reinforce respect. Even as the world changes, reliance remains. The pressure truly begins to mount. What once felt like gradual change now gathers weight, direction, and inevitability. The forge still burns, but beyond its glow, forces are moving that will reshape metalworking forever. To understand this fully, we must slow down even further and examine what these forces are doing, not just to blacksmithing, but to the very idea of craft itself. The first and greatest change is scale. For thousands of years, blacksmithing has been defined by human limits: how long a person can swing a hammer, how much heat a body can endure, how much metal a small team can shape in a day. These limits shaped everything from blade size to production speed to settlement planning. Now those limits begin to dissolve. Rolling mills appear. Instead of hammering iron flat, massive rollers compress it evenly, quickly, and repeatedly. Sheets of metal emerge that would have taken days of labor to produce by hand. The surface is consistent, the thickness predictable, the effort minimal by comparison. To the blacksmith, this is both astonishing and unsettling. The mill does not tire, it does not lose focus, it does not misjudge a strike, but it also does not feel the metal. It does not listen, it does not adapt in the moment, it simply performs its function relentlessly. This introduces a fundamental divide. Metalworking begins to separate into two paths: shaping by force and shaping by judgment. Industry favors force, craft favors judgment. For a time, they coexist uneasily. Blast furnaces grow taller and hotter. Iron is no longer produced in small blooms that must be coaxed and refined. It flows. Molten metal pours like water, collected in quantities that dwarf anything earlier blacksmiths could imagine. Production explodes. With this comes abundance. Iron is no longer rare or precious in the same way. It becomes cheap, available, replaceable. Objects once repaired endlessly are now discarded and replaced. This alone changes how people think about metal. Durability becomes less important than speed. For the blacksmith, this is a quiet heartbreak. For centuries, the goal was longevity. A blade that could be reforged for generations, a tool that aged alongside its owner. Now metal objects are expected to fail and be replaced. This undermines a core value of the craft. Factories emerge. Rows of machines perform single tasks repeatedly. One cuts, one drills, one stamps. Each worker tends a narrow process. No one sees the whole object from beginning to end. This fragmentation is profound. The blacksmith once knew every stage intimately: ore, fire, shape, finish. Now metalworking is divided among many hands, none of which fully understand the entire journey. Efficiency increases, understanding decreases, time itself changes. Production schedules replace natural rhythms, shifts replace seasons. Work is dictated by demand, not daylight or recovery. The forge no longer rests when the smith rests. Machines continue. Some blacksmiths enter this world. They become supervisors, technicians, machine maintainers. Their deep understanding of metal makes them valuable. They troubleshoot failures others cannot explain. They translate between material behavior and mechanical systems. Others refuse. They remain at smaller forges serving local needs, repairs, custom work, artistic iron. They accept smaller incomes in exchange for autonomy and meaning. This division defines the era. Neither path is wrong, both require skill, but they cultivate different values. Within factories, precision reaches new levels. Measurements become exact, tolerances shrink, interchangeable parts become standard. This revolutionizes machinery, transportation, and infrastructure. Metal becomes modular. This modularity reshapes society. Machines can be repaired quickly. Systems expand rapidly, complexity grows, the world accelerates, but modularity has limits. Not everything can be standardized. Wear varies, stress concentrates unpredictably. When systems fail, understanding material behavior becomes critical again. And here, traditional blacksmith knowledge resurfaces. Experienced smiths know how metal fails. They recognize fatigue, microfractures, stress lines. They understand how heat history affects strength. This intuition becomes invaluable in a world obsessed with speed. Thus, the old knowledge does not vanish. It hides. Education formalizes. Engineering emerges as a discipline. Metallurgy is studied scientifically. What blacksmiths learned through experience is now expressed in equations and charts. Heat treatment is quantified, carbon percentages are measured. This is not a replacement, it is a translation. Science explains what craft already knew, but explanation does not equal mastery. Knowing why steel hardens does not teach the hand how to harden it well. This gap becomes evident. Many can calculate, few can execute flawlessly. Blacksmiths who bridge this gap become rare and powerful. They understand theory and practice. They design processes that respect material limits. They prevent catastrophic failures. They innovate responsibly. Meanwhile, mass production reshapes warfare, agriculture, and transportation. Weapons are produced in enormous numbers, tools are distributed widely, railways spread, bridges span distances once impossible. Metal defines the landscape, but speed introduces fragility. When systems fail, they fail spectacularly. A broken rail derails trains. A faulty boiler explodes. A poorly forged component brings down entire structures. Each disaster reinforces an ancient truth: metal demands respect. As a result, inspection and standards arise, testing protocols are developed, stress tests, quality checks, certification. These are attempts to institutionalize judgment, to replace the experienced eye with procedure. They help, but they are imperfect. No test captures every variable. No rule anticipates every scenario. When anomalies occur, human insight is still required, and so the blacksmith survives, not always at the center, not always visible, but present. In workshops, smiths repair what factories cannot replace easily. In shipyards, they adjust components that don't fit perfectly. In rail yards, they reforge broken parts on site. Their adaptability is unmatched. Artistic blacksmithing experiences a quiet revival. As mass-produced objects flood the world, people begin to crave uniqueness again. Hand-forged gates, railings, tools, and decorative pieces gain value. Imperfection becomes character. Evidence of the hand becomes desirable. This redefines beauty. Not flawless uniformity, but intentional variation, texture, subtle asymmetry, the mark of effort. Blacksmiths who pursue this path lean into tradition. They revive old techniques, charcoal fires, hand hammers. They emphasize process as much as product. Their work tells a story. At the same time, some embrace modern tools selectively. Power hammers, presses, and modern steels are used thoughtfully. Tradition and innovation blend. The craft evolves without surrendering its essence. Education adapts again. Blacksmithing is taught not just as a trade, but as heritage. Skills are preserved intentionally. Knowledge is documented. Communities form around the craft. The forge becomes a place of continuity. Amid accelerating change, it anchors something human. Slow work, direct feedback, tangible results. This contrast becomes increasingly meaningful. In a world of abstraction, forging is physical. In a world of speed, it is deliberate. In a world of disposability, it values longevity. We step into the modern world not abruptly, not with a sharp break, but through a long, gradual dawn where old firelight and new electric glow exist side by side. The forge does not go dark. Instead, it changes its meaning. The blacksmith now lives in a world where metal is everywhere. Steel frames hold up cities. Machines shape machines. Objects arrive already finished, stamped, welded, polished by processes far removed from heat and hammer. For the first time in human history, most people go their entire lives without seeing raw metal transformed by hand. And yet, the knowledge of transformation does not disappear. It waits. In the modern era, blacksmithing is no longer required for survival in the same way it once was. Food, shelter, transport, and defense no longer depend on the local forge. This alone reshapes the craft's identity more than any machine ever could. When something is no longer necessary, only two things can keep it alive: value and meaning. Blacksmithing survives because it has both. The modern blacksmith begins with a choice, not a necessity, not inheritance alone. A choice to step into heat, effort, and resistance in a world that increasingly avoids all three. This choice gives the craft a new kind of power, intentionality. In this era, blacksmiths are no longer defined by what society demands of them, but by what they demand of themselves. Some enter the craft through utility. They repair farm equipment, restore old tools, maintain machinery where replacement is expensive or impossible. In these spaces, traditional skills prove their worth immediately. When a machine part must be modified on the spot, when tolerance is imperfect, when reality does not match the blueprint, the blacksmith steps forward. Others enter through art. They are drawn to form, texture, movement. They see iron not as a problem to solve, but as a medium to explore. Gates curve, railings flow, sculptures emerge from bar stock. Fire becomes expressive. This artistic turn does not weaken the craft, it deepens it. To bend metal beautifully, one must understand it intimately. Decoration requires more control, not less. A poorly forged scroll cracks, a rushed twist collapses. Beauty punishes carelessness as harshly as function ever did. Some blacksmiths walk both paths. They repair during the day and create at night. Utility sharpens their discipline. Art preserves their curiosity. Together, they form a complete understanding of metal's possibilities. Modern tools enter the forge, but carefully. Power hammers replace some brute force. Hydraulic presses move metal in ways human arms never could. Temperature control becomes precise. Modern steels offer consistency unimaginable to early smiths, but none of this eliminates judgment. A power hammer amplifies mistakes. A press can ruin steel just as easily as it can shape it. Modern steel still fails if mistreated. The blacksmith remains responsible for every decision. In this sense, the ancient lessons remain unchanged. Heat still matters. Timing still matters. Patience still matters. The difference now is that failure is no longer hidden. In earlier eras, a flawed blade might break quietly, forgotten by history. Today, a failed structure, a cracked weld, or a fractured component can be examined, recorded, and shared. Knowledge spreads faster than ever. This transparency reshapes learning. Blacksmiths no longer rely solely on lineage. They learn from books, videos, shared experiments. Ancient techniques are revived from fragments. Lost methods are reconstructed. The past becomes accessible in new ways, yet hands still must learn what words cannot teach. No amount of reading replaces the feel of steel moving under the hammer. No diagram conveys the exact moment when metal is ready. This gap ensures the craft remains physical, embodied, and deeply human. Modern blacksmiths often find themselves becoming teachers. Workshops are opened, classes are taught, demonstrations draw crowds. People gather not because they need iron objects, but because they want to see transformation happen in real time. There is something hypnotic about the forge. Fire commands attention. Sparks awaken something ancient in the mind. The sound of hammer on anvil resonates beyond logic. It speaks to memory older than language. In these moments, the audience does not just watch metal change. They watch effort turn into form, resistance become cooperation, chaos resolve into order. This is the deepest gift of blacksmithing in the modern world. It reminds people that making things well takes time. In a culture obsessed with speed, the forge insists on slowness. In a culture of disposability, it insists on care. In a culture of abstraction, it insists on touch. The blacksmith becomes a quiet counterpoint to modern life, not loud, not nostalgic, simply present. At the same time, the craft continues to evolve technically. Modern metallurgy provides steels with specific properties for specific tasks. Heat treatment is controlled precisely. Failures are analyzed scientifically. This knowledge empowers the blacksmith rather than replacing them. The best modern smiths integrate both worlds. They respect ancient methods while embracing modern understanding. They know why techniques work, not just that they do. This combination produces extraordinary results. Custom blades rival industrial ones. Structural ironwork blends strength with elegance. Tools are forged that feel alive in the hand. In these works, the first great blacksmiths live on, not as names but as principles: curiosity, patience, observation, respect for material. These principles cross every era intact. Even as blacksmithing becomes rarer as a profession, it grows stronger as a craft. Those who practice it do so deliberately. They invest time, they accept difficulty, they value mastery over convenience. This gives the craft resilience. It is no longer vulnerable to economic shifts alone. It exists because people choose it, and choices are powerful. As technology advances further, automation, robotics, digital fabrication, the forge remains relevant precisely because it is different. When machines do everything, human-made objects stand out. When perfection is cheap, imperfection becomes meaningful. When speed dominates, slowness becomes valuable. Blacksmithing occupies this space naturally. It does not compete with factories, it complements them. It offers what they cannot: presence, adaptation, and soul. The blacksmith of today may never forge a weapon for war or a tool for survival, but they forge something equally important: connection. Connection to material, connection to process, connection to history. Every strike echoes backward through time, through medieval guilds, through Iron Age forges, through bronze hearths, through stone tools and firelight. Back to the first human who struck metal and noticed it bend instead of break. That moment never ended, it simply changed form. We slow down one last time, not because there is nowhere left to go, but because understanding arrives best in stillness. This final stretch of our journey is not about new tools or new machines. It is about meaning, about what all of this has been leading toward since the first human watched fire dance against stone and felt curiosity rise. The story of the first great blacksmiths was never only about metal, it was about relationship. From the beginning, blacksmithing has been a conversation between human intention and natural resistance. Stone resisted being shaped, metal resisted being bent, fire resisted being controlled, and humans learned slowly and imperfectly that force alone was never enough. Observation mattered, timing mattered, restraint mattered. This lesson appears again and again across history. Early humans learned that striking stone too hard shattered it, while striking it just right revealed a blade. They learned that copper bent instead of broke, but only if treated gently. They learned that iron demanded patience, that it punished haste, that it rewarded attention. Every era reinforced the same truth: the world cannot be dominated into cooperation, it must be understood. The first great blacksmiths were not powerful because they were strong, they were powerful because they listened. They listened to the sound of metal, they listened to the color of fire, they listened to failure without ego. This mindset shaped more than weapons, it shaped societies. Communities organized themselves around forges because the forge embodied a philosophy of making. Nothing appeared instantly, nothing was free. Everything required effort, preparation, and responsibility. When the first weapons were forged, they did not simply make humans better fighters. They made humans better planners, better teachers, better preservers of knowledge. A weapon that took days to make could not be wasted thoughtlessly. It carried weight beyond its physical mass. As blacksmithing matured, this weight extended into culture. Weapons became symbols not just of violence, but of protection, duty, and identity. Tools became extensions of labor, dignity, and survival. Metal objects marked moments, harvests, rituals, borders, agreements. The blacksmith stood quietly behind all of this, rarely ruling. Rarely celebrated loudly, but always necessary. This pattern teaches us something essential about progress. True progress is rarely dramatic, it is cumulative. It is built through countless small improvements, passed hand to hand, generation to generation. The first great blacksmiths did not invent the modern world in a single moment. They contributed to it patiently, piece by piece. When societies industrialized, this truth did not disappear. Even as machines replaced hands, they were guided by principles learned at the forge. Heat treatment still mattered, material limits still mattered, failure still mattered. Industry simply scaled these lessons. And when scale overwhelmed understanding, catastrophe followed. Bridges collapsed, boilers exploded, machines failed. Each disaster reminded humanity that ignoring material truth carries consequences. Again and again, the world was forced to relearn what blacksmiths had always known. That metal remembers how it is treated. In the modern age, blacksmithing no longer defines civilization's survival, but it defines something just as important: perspective. In a world where most things are hidden behind interfaces, forged metal is honest. You can see where it was struck, you can feel where it resisted, you can trace the path of effort through its surface. This honesty is rare. A forged object does not pretend to be effortless. It does not hide labor. It does not deny time. It invites the user to respect both the object and the process that created it. This is why blacksmithing endures even when it is no longer required. It teaches lessons modern life struggles to convey. That mastery takes time, that shortcuts have costs, that materials have limits, that patience is not weakness. The first great blacksmiths did not know they were teaching these lessons. They were simply trying to survive, to improve, to understand. But their mindset embedded itself into the human story. Every time a blade was reforged instead of discarded, humanity practiced sustainability before it had a word for it. Every time an apprentice learned by watching instead of rushing, humanity practiced humility. Every time a smith adjusted technique instead of blaming material, humanity practiced responsibility. These values outlasted empires. Even today, when someone chooses to learn blacksmithing, they step into this lineage. They inherit not just techniques, but a way of thinking. They learn to slow down, to pay attention, to accept resistance as information rather than opposition. They learn that progress is not linear. Sometimes metal must be heated again. Sometimes it must be folded back on itself. Sometimes failure is not an end but preparation. This mirrors life more closely than most technologies ever could, and that is why the story of the first great blacksmiths still matters. Not because we need more swords, not because we romanticize the past, but because we still need reminders of how humans learn best through touch, repetition, and respect for reality. As we reach the end of this long journey, imagine once more that earliest forge, not a building, not a workshop, just a fire at the edge of the night. An early human stands nearby holding something newly shaped. It is imperfect. It bears marks of uncertainty, but it works, and that is enough. That moment, small, quiet, unrecorded, never truly ended. It became villages, it became cities, it became industries, it became art. And it remains alive every time a human chooses to shape the world carefully instead of forcing it blindly. The entire history of the first great blacksmiths is, in the end, the history of humanity learning how to work with resistance rather than against it. Fire taught us, metal tested us, time refined us. And that lesson, like a well-forged blade, still holds its edge. From here we arrive at the closing of this long journey, not with an ending that feels sudden, but with one that feels earned. We return to the fire one last time, carrying everything we have learned with us. When we look back across the entire history of the first great blacksmiths, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This craft was never just about making weapons. Weapons were only one expression of something far deeper, the human need to understand the world through doing. The first blacksmiths did not wake up intending to change history. They were not trying to dominate nature or conquer others. They were trying to solve problems, how to cut more effectively, how to hunt more safely, how to protect their people, how to make tools that lasted longer than stone. What made them great was not strength, but attention. They noticed that fire could soften what was once unyielding. They noticed that repeated effort produced better results than reckless force. They noticed that mistakes were teachers, not enemies. And through this noticing, they slowly learned something profound, that the world responds differently when it is approached with patience. This lesson shaped everything that followed. As blacksmithing evolved, it carried this mindset forward. The forge became a place where time mattered, where rushing ruined results, where discipline produced freedom. These values quietly shaped civilizations. They influenced how people built homes, raised defenses, created tools, and even how they thought about work itself. When iron replaced stone, humanity did not become more violent by nature, it became more capable. Capability always carries responsibility. Blacksmiths understood this early. That is why so many cultures surrounded the forge with rules, rituals, and respect. They knew that power without restraint was dangerous. As weapons improved, so did societies. Agriculture expanded, infrastructure strengthened, trade flourished. Metal allowed humans to settle, to plan, to build for the future rather than just survive the present. And when blacksmithing reached its peak of mastery, it did not collapse under its own success. Instead, it transformed. It adapted to new tools, new systems, and new worlds. Even when machines took over much of metal production, the blacksmith did not vanish. The craft endured because it was never only about output, it was about understanding material truth. In the modern world, this truth is more important than ever. We live surrounded by objects we do not understand, systems we cannot see, processes hidden behind layers of abstraction. Blacksmithing cuts through all of that. It is honest work. What you see is what happened. Every mark has a reason. That honesty is why people still gather around forges today. Not because they need iron gates or hand-forged blades, but because watching metal change under human hands reminds them of something essential. That effort matters, that skill matters, that time matters. The first great blacksmiths taught humanity how to work with resistance instead of fighting blindly against it. They showed us that strength without understanding fails, and that patience without effort goes nowhere. Progress lives in the balance between the two. And so, even now when a modern blacksmith lights a forge, they are not recreating the past. They are continuing a conversation that began thousands of years ago. A conversation between fire and form, between resistance and intention, between humanity and the world it inhabits. This is the true legacy of the first great blacksmiths, not the weapons. Not the tools, but the mindset. A mindset that says, learn first, strike second. A mindset that says, respect material reality. A mindset that says, take your time and do it right. That lesson has survived every era, every empire, every technological shift. And as long as humans continue to shape the world with their hands, it will continue to matter. If you've stayed with us through this entire journey, thank you for sharing this time and this history with us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the entire history of the first great blacksmiths, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more calm, long-form history like this. Please leave a comment below and let us know what part of this story you found most interesting, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love reading your comments and they help this channel grow. Until next time, rest well, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next history.